Okay, it's Friday, December 9th. This is an end of the day and end of the week SPY recap. On the daily chart here today, we closed with a red shooter bar that closed near the low of the day. It moved up early, took out just the high of the previous day, never got above the pre-market highs, and then curled over by the end of the day and took out the low of the day. So given this red shooter bar, we're certainly anticipating lower prices into Monday. And on the weekly chart, which I've been discussing in detail all week, we end up with a nice red bar here that also leads us to, expect some continuation lower. If we go lower, which we're expecting, there is that first target down here at the yellow line, which I've been talking about, and that's that monthly midpoint of that monthly bar that, since we failed to move up here on the first day of the month to the upside, we've been red ever since in December. If we can get to the halfway point of November and really not bounce from there, then this whole month might turn red and target, these lows down here. But we'll see if that happens. In the meantime, though, just in the bigger picture again, I've mentioned this from the middle of the week. Once I saw a 2-down week, I'm going to need the weekly chart now to turn up before I get bullish in any kind of major way. And that's why I was even bearish this morning. And I'll show you the intraday structure in a minute. But in terms of the weekly chart now, the only way, if we do come down and follow through a little lower on that red bar and take out this stop, we might reverse right out of the gates and come up to the halfway point of this bar. That could show us a reversal sign into next week. If not, if we just have a small, maybe a neutral looking week, a little 2-down week that doesn't go very far, maybe we'll get a 2-up week the week after. We could get an inside bar and then go higher after the inside bar. So there's a bunch of ways it could turn, but it's going to take a little bit of a constructive price action now and probably a little bit of time before this turns up, if it even does. But for now, we're just looking for continuation lower. The key is going to be when we hit this target right here, that's a key level where either we're going to just fail and then start back up, or it's going to really take off and start heading to these lower targets. So we'll find out next week. But in terms of today, I mentioned in the pre-open video, I was biased to the downside. The main reason there is we had this big gap down in the pre-market. Not gap down, but we were up there pre-market. Then a producer price index came out at 730, moved the market much lower in the pre-market. So at that point, there was a very volatile session here. Likely we weren't going to go above the pre-market highs. So we're starting down here, and therefore I kind of anticipated right out of before the market even opened that this weekly bar was probably going to end up in some way red. Even if we rallied a little bit, it was still going to end up pretty red, which would mean follow through lower next week. So that's why I was just biased to the downside. But anyway, in terms of structure, we did open up in the middle of that big range, and then we kind of had a green bar and we paused a little bit. I tried a little green to red move with Apple stock, thinking maybe on this second bar we would be heading lower, and I took a very small loss, but then I was able to buy some puts on Roku and Coinbase and there were other stocks you could have chosen on the downside. There were also stocks on the upside, quite frankly. I'll show you those in a second. If you wanted to just say we opened green and we're pausing here and then we broke to the upside, you could have had some gains, but very typical where you kind of just get the morning price action here just in this range and then it doesn't follow through. And it's not surprising that, in this case, just given the bigger picture that we rolled all the way over, I was kind of expecting this, to tell you the truth. And that's why just looking at like Roku, that's the stock I actually bought puts up here at the blue line after a big run up because I was anticipating that rollover. Coinbase, I went short from the start. That was a nice downward day today. Other stocks, like I said, like Netflix, started green and went up. At least in the morning, you could have had a nice trade. You could have had a nice trade on Tesla in the morning, even Nvidia, which really didn't follow through all that much, went paused and head up. You did have an hour to have small gains or break even at the worst. It didn't follow through, but everything rolled over at the end. So we'll end it up that way. The bias was to the downside. Once you saw the very wide pre-market range and you just saw it grinding up here, there was no reason to really think that we were going to have any momentum to get above that those high, the high of the pre-market. Instead, we just took at the high of yesterday, and that's where price decided to just take out some stops and probably roll over at that point in line with its bigger picture trend. So a lot of negative, negative week overall, and definitely looking for follow through lower into next week, and we'll just have to see how that unfolds, if any momentum picks up, or if we just kind of hit some targets here and then decide to reverse. But as of now, it's been to the downside ever since December 1st, and I'm still looking for more downside going into next week.